Today I'm joined by beauty photographer Eddie New. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Sure. How you doing?
So Eddie's joining us all the way from New York. We made it happen, which is I'm
We
so
did, we did.
grateful to you. Thank you, Eddie.
That's fine. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go.
He's ready to go. So Eddie, I
Yes.
would love to know, what do you spend what do your weeks look like? What are you working on mostly at the moment? You know,
I mean, it's probably the same with a lot of makeup artists, right? We don't know what our weeks look like. I never know what my week looks like. Sometimes it's a full week of retouching. Sometimes it's shoots. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's too busy.
yeah.
It's the same. It's the same for any creative field, really.
Yeah. What would you say is like the bulk of your photography work when you're on shoots?
Right. So from a commercial point of view, I'd probably say beauty work. So a lot of cosmetics, a lot of skincare. That tends to be where most of the commercial work comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also just love shooting my own personal work. So a lot of portraiture, a lot of test shoots, a lot of that's where the creative comes into it. So you can get that balance between the two.
Yeah. How did you end up in the beauty world?
I don't know. It's actually funny. It's a really funny story actually, because my mum was a hair and makeup artist for most of her life for her career. And I had no intention in getting into photography or any of this. This was something that happened later in life for me. And it's all thanks to a makeup artist in Melbourne who I believe you've had on the show, Monica Gingold.
Monica,
You know,
yeah.
Monica? Yeah, yeah. So Monica's actually the one that got me my first ever test shoot down in Melbourne.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the same as everybody, right? I was doing something totally different. I was an industrial designer and
Okay.
I worked at a car company designing cars. So that's what I went to uni for. That was the dream. That was kind of what the plan was. And then I got a full-time job. It was so corporate. I just couldn't kind of do it. And so I took some time off. And in that year off, I met Monica, and photography was just a hobby. It was something I loved to do. And she said to me, "Do you want to do a test shoot?" And I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
But I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So Monica organized it with an agency down in Melbourne. We did a little test shoot in a park with a development model.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. I sent the agency the pictures, and then they got back to me and said, "Do you want to shoot more?" And I said, "Yes." And then another agency reached out, and it all kind of just snowballed from there.
Gosh, what a fab story.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Okay. I'd say I feel like I've been saying 10 years for a long time.
I love
Uh,
that.
Probably like 12, 13 years. I think maybe,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, so
somewhere in
like
there.
2010-ish.
Yeah, I think so. I'm 38 now, so I feel like it
Yeah.
was like my mid 20s to late 20s. So like somewhere like 26,
Okay.
27. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So did you do any formal training with photography?
None, no, none at
None?
all. I learned how to use a camera from my dad. He wasn't a professional photographer, but he always had
Yeah.
a camera. So he taught me the basics.
Okay.
And when I did that shoot with Monica, technically I was shocking. I had no idea what I was doing. I love taking pictures, and I always had a camera in my hand, but not really the most technical photographer. And so once I started doing those test shoots, I actually started assisting at that point because I kind of realized once I got into it, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn. So I full time assisted for a while down in Melbourne.
Right. Yeah.
And then that's when I kind of made the move to Sydney because a lot of the work I was seeing in the editorials were coming out of Sydney.
Hmm.
So I thought, why not? I'll give it a shot.
So you took the year off, and once you took that year off, you never went back to your other job?
No, I just sent them a message saying I don't think I'm coming back, and they were fine with it. They understood.
Yeah.
I feel like, uh, yeah. I mean, I just the difference for me between what I was doing at that job and then when I had a camera in my hand shooting these little tests and even being an assistant on set, I was just so excited by it. Like that passion in contrast to the full time job I had. It was just so different. There was no
Did
going.
you how did you get into assisting? Did you just contact the agencies?
It was Monica again. She actually put me in
Okay.
touch with a photographer, and that was my
Yep.
first assisting job.
Yep.
And then when I got up to Sydney, I just hustle. I just email
Yep.
people. You get a lot of. I'm sure a lot of all assistants know this. So many emails just don't get responded to.
Okay. Yep.
But you've just got to be persistent. You've just got to keep checking in. It's always just a timing thing. I feel like
Yes.
you
Yeah.
just got to keep reaching out, and then the timing will work at some point. You've just got to be ready to jump on it.
Yeah. I think that's really a good thing that you said, that a lot of emails don't get responded to.
Totally.
And I think that we can interpret that in so many ways.
Yes.
But as long as you're not like baby reindeer Martha, like emailing someone 15 times a day,
Yeah.
checking in, you're never going to
100%.
be annoying, right? You just
There's a
check
level.
in.
I mean, yeah, I'm guilty of this as well because kind of these days I'm on the opposite side of that where
Yeah.
I get a lot of emails, a lot of
Yeah.
messages. And look, honestly, it's never personal. I mean, unless
No.
you've written an absolutely horrendous email to me or got my name wrong, that happens as well. It's usually just a timing thing. It's usually just
Yeah.
because I've got an assisting team or I'm really busy at that moment. It's never personal. Yeah, I think you're right, there's a fine line between continuously checking in and checking in too much, or even the level of formality.
Mm,
You don't have to be too formal, but at the same time, if you just keep hitting the DMs, it's not really the way to go, I think, as
yeah.
well.
You think an email's
I
a better
think
way to
so.
approach it?
Look, it depends on the person and the person's vibe. For me personally, I don't mind if someone sends me a message on Instagram to say, "Hey, I shot you an email earlier in the week or something," or just that's fine. But if they're just shooting DMs very casually, that kind of to me, I kind of don't take that quite as seriously as someone who's
Yeah.
emailed me.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be too formal either. You don't have to attach a CV and a cover letter and all of that as well. Our industry is pretty relaxed, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're the clients, when you're shooting for a client, there's big budgets involved, right? So it's a professional thing. So you need that level of
Well,
professionalism from a assistant. What do you like to
definitely.
hear in your email?
From an assistant.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I think the first thing for me is like just if they're familiar with my work, firstly, like, I think it's
Yes.
good to be personable in your email.
Yeah.
If I can get a sense of why you want to assist me personally, that helps me because then I can kind of understand where you're coming into it from. I'm a really big, I almost always try to get a coffee or get a catch up with an assistant before I put them on a job. Like you said, big budgets with the clients, particularly on the big kind of ad jobs. Yeah, you just kind of want to vet your team first. I mean,
Absolutely.
ideally, you can get assistants on smaller jobs or test shoots first and just kind of get to know them. But I think until you actually meet someone, it's very hard to get a feel for where they're at,
Yeah.
their strengths, their weaknesses, all of that kind of thing as well.
So really, an email that's introducing who they are that shows some level of professionalism and warmth. I think is that
Yeah,
is that
definitely. And
maybe?
just, let the person know where you're at in your career. Don't
Yeah.
overshoot. I don't think you have to act like you've got it all sorted out and that you're the best in the world. And, some people kind of have this feeling like they have to be a certain level to assist. I think it's better to just be honest with where you're at. If you're just starting out, just say you're starting out. There's
Mm.
always a position, like often I'll have a situation where I've got my first assistant, I've got a digital operator, but I don't have a second assistant. And that's where I'll
Yeah.
get someone on set where they don't need technical knowledge, but for me to know that, I need to know where you're at. So I think always just make it really clear where you're at in your career, what you're looking to do, why you want to be an assistant. Just, and, keep it light. Don't be too, you don't want a full essay.
Yeah, I know. Easy to read, right?
Yeah, just keep it simple.
What about if someone sort of said they're willing to come and assist you on a test shoot and there's no, for free, basically. Is that a
Mm.
good?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, when I started out assisting, I was always happy to jump on a shoot for free, particularly
Yeah.
if it was the first time I was working with someone or if it was a
Yeah.
really good opportunity. But there's a line to this because you don't want to be, it's very easy to be exploited as an assistant. And I think that you do need to have a standard. But at the same time, I've seen people really miss opportunities, not just with me, but with other photographers and other teams where they've gotten too intense about the money thing too early on. And I think that as we all know, what you get out of assisting isn't, it's sure, we all need money. It's tough times. I get it. But what you get is the experience. You're gaining experience being on a set, seeing how it works. It's not just the technical knowledge you're learning. You're also meeting other teams, other people's assistants. It's the networking. It's all of that. So I think 100%, if you are able to, I always kind of say to the assistants who are starting out, it's better to have a part-time job, just a casual job and assisting and finance the assisting through something else if you can, especially early on when you're starting out, because the money's not great. It's not something that I think you want that stress on or that pressure on purely from assisting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Now that's really great advice. And I think that's actually great advice for any creative across, not just the photographer, but maybe the
totally.
styling
Any,
assistant, the makeup, the hair assistant, all the assistants.
totally.
What you said you don't want to be exploited, but there is a point where you need to maybe do things that aren't being paid just so people can get to know you and know who you are.
Absolutely. 100%,
Yeah.
especially if it's the first time. Like I think as a photographer, my general rule with my teams, if I'm not getting paid, you might not get paid. But if I'm
Yeah.
getting paid, you'll all get paid. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna
Okay.
get you on something for free if I'm getting money. It doesn't make sense. It's a team effort and assistants work so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you said, if it's, in that introductory email, just offering to come on a test shoot, like a little half day test shoot for free, that might get you in the door. And then who knows, from there you might build a a relationship with that team for years, and the
Mm,
payoff will be huge. So you just don't know where it's going to come from. And actually, I got some of my best opportunities from doing volunteer work or free work, actually, when I look back on it. That's actually
yeah.
where I built some of the most amazing moments that kind of just snowballed in my career. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
What kind of things? Just from being on shoots or
Yeah,
doing
the one that
something?
actually comes to mind, funnily enough, I had a model agent actually email me. This is years ago, but they contacted me asking me if I wanted to kind of just donate my time to be on a charity fashion show.
Okay.
And they had a casting director who was coming to town who needed help. I'd never done anything to do with fashion shows at the time. And they were like, look, there's no money, it's not paid, but if you want to jump on it, it could be a good experience. And I thought, yeah, cool, why not? What have I got to lose? It's not something I've done before. And so I met that casting director. And from there, he actually started taking me to shows in Milan and Paris. And we started doing like the fashion shows around the world together. And the amount I learned from him was just like unbelievable. It was incredible. And it was all just from that one little tiny
Yeah.
opportunity for one random charity show in Sydney that, I didn't expect to go anywhere.
Okay.
But through seeing how hard I worked on that, he was just like, yeah, cool. I got a call one day. He said, can you come to Milan next week?
Amazing. What a
You know,
story. I love that.
yeah, everyone's got a story like that. I feel like we've all kind of had
Yeah.
that moment where something has led, it all just leads to other things. It's all kind of just a flow on effect.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So then did that sort of start your traveling, like with work, do you think?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, for work, it definitely did. I mean, I've always loved traveling. That's where I've kind of always got a lot of inspiration. I used to backpack when I was after high school, I went backpacking as much as I could,
yeah,
went traveling as much as I could. But yeah, I think once I did those trips with him to Milan and Paris and I saw the scope of how things work when you get out of Australia overseas,
yeah,
that was definitely something that really appealed to me. And I wanted to kind of keep chasing that and keep experiencing that. And yeah, I think that actually was the starting point when I look back.
yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds great. That sounds like so much fun. Do you remember sort of thinking when that was at the beginning when that happened? Did you think it was a turning point? Like,
Good question. I think you don't know when that's going to happen. Like when it happened, I remember being on that plane on my way there thinking like, what is going on? And I was so excited and I can't believe this is happening. I felt it was a turning point at that point. But if you had
Yeah.
asked me 2 weeks before that happened, I didn't think anything was happening. There
Mm,
was no lead up or build up to it where I thought, yeah, this is going to be a point in my career where it's all turning around. Back then, I mean, I was barely making any money. I was still assisting. I just remember sitting there sometimes just being like, how am I going to make this work?
yeah.
Just being like, I might just need to pack it up and go back home with my family.
Yeah.
So you don't know when it's going to happen. I think sticking around, being persistent, that's half the game.
Yeah. A makeup artist said, well, she got advice from another makeup artist, and that makeup artist said it's a stayers race.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's
totally agree with that.
whoever sticks around,
Totally agree with
and
that.
sticks
Yeah.
at it.
I mean, some of the best advice I got from one of the first photographers I assisted, he just gave it to me completely straight. And he just said, the first few years, you're going to make no money. So save as much as you can and be prepared that you might lose it all. Like, it's just going to be a tough first few years. There's no way around that. Be prepared. And I think at the time I was like, wow, why is he so negative? Rah, rah, rah. But it played out that way. And I was really glad I got a little bit of forewarning because I think for a lot of people, they don't people aren't direct and honest and blunt enough with them. And I think that when you're starting out, when you're assisting, and when you make that transition from assisting to actually being your own artist, you've got to
Mm,
build it, and so that takes time. And there will be periods where you're not making much money, and that's okay.
mm,
It's
mm.
all part of the journey. We've
Yeah.
all been through it, and I think for me that was incredible advice. Just stick
Yeah.
through it, be persistent, do what you got to do, get a casual job. When I started out, I was shooting events and weddings on the side to make money,
Yeah.
and you just do what you got to do.
I mean, weddings are a great way to make a decent chunk of money in a day for makeup artists, and I'm assuming
Yeah,
for
it's huge for you guys.
photographers as well,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, it's great. I'm so grateful for that. I mean, those events that I was shooting back when I started out, they were what allowed me to actually save some money and maintain enough time until I had my own career. Without that, there's no way I would have made it through. There was a point I remember where, and I'm sure for makeup artists, this is a thing as well. At some point, you kind of need to decide what direction you want to go. And
Yeah.
there was a point I remember where I was still taking on events. I was really time poor because I was trying so hard to get into fashion and beauty and all this kind of stuff. But I was still every weekend shooting the events and retouching them during the week. And there was a point where I just had to let go of that safety net and actually give 100% to actually try and build a career in
Yeah.
the area I wanted.
Hmm.
And when that time comes, like you've got
Yeah.
to take that jump eventually.
Yeah, and it can be a bit scary.
Yeah, totally. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you made the move from Melbourne to Sydney, did you get a part-time job here in Sydney, or is that when you went into events and bridal?
No, so I did the events in Melbourne
Okay.
non-stop, and I only
Okay.
went to Sydney once I felt like I'd saved enough money to kind of at least make it through that first, year or 6 months or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Okay.
And so in Sydney, that's kind of where I started just like losing all the money while I was assisting. But Sydney's expensive,
Yeah, it
and
is.
I was doing assistant work, but I wasn't doing any paid work myself.
Okay.
And the assistant rates just weren't enough back then to kind of sustain it. But I knew that again going in, so I was prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thank God for those events because they helped me get through it and get through that time. And I would still actually fly back down to Melbourne occasionally for a wedding or a bar mitzvah or a 18th. But I was just doing anything at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doing what you had to do.
Yeah.
And when you were testing, did you have a direction? Did you know you wanted to get into more fashion beauty? Were you testing with that
Yeah.
intention?
So not really. I mean, I think, and I'm actually really curious from your point of view if this is the same for makeup artists. But as a photographer, when you're starting out, you're very influenced by other artists that you're looking up to. And so
Yeah.
I feel like early on in the piece, when I was trying to do my own tests, I had no idea what my style was, and I was trying to figure it out. But it would, when I look back, it would change. It would change depending on where my inspiration was coming from.
True. Yeah.
There was a time I wanted to be a fashion photographer because all I was assisting was fashion photographers, and all I wanted to do was shoot fashion shoots in studio. And then I'd assist someone else who had incredible, style in a different direction, and that would influence me. And I think that early on, you're trying to find your way. Particularly as a photographer, you have no idea like what your style is going to be or what it is, and it evolves with time. And I
Mm,
think it's pretty common.
mm,
Um, but I think eventually it's kind of hard to narrow this down, but I think eventually what kind of happened for me was that when I was trying, like, I guess, like, I was doing all these different things and I started doing paid testing for some of the modeling agencies, but nothing really kind of felt like it was coming from an internal place of like what I actually love or what I want to do.
yeah.
And it's funny how this correlates actually, because I think that the point where my own personal career started taking off was when I just started shooting things that I loved and sharing things I loved as opposed to what I thought people wanted to see. I think it's pretty common, right? I think,
Yeah. I feel like I've just turned that corner myself. Like I was posting and doing things that I thought people wanted, like I thought that I needed to look like I was doing. Does that make sense? And now I'm like, this isn't even working. I don't even know what's happening. So now I've just been like, no, I'm going to post what I love, and I'm going to work to try and do the shoots that I love,
yeah,
and it does feel much better.
100%. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it has to come from an authentic place because I think that if you're getting in your head, and it's even worse now than when I started, but with social media and everything, if you're
Yeah.
sharing and posting because you think that's what, brands want to see, or you've got a dream brand, so you're shooting and sharing and posting things that you think they're going to book you on. The reality of that is they're probably not, because a really good art director or a really good creative director wants to see your vision. They want to see what makes you special. The first time I actually came to New York, it was really interesting hearing feedback on my folios because the first thing they were all saying was, and they didn't know what was what, but they all pretty much were gravitating towards my own personal little test shoots in a window, just me and the model, no team.
Yeah.
They were the shots they would focus in on and be like, tell me about this image. And then I'd show them a major campaign that I did in Australia and they'd just skip straight past and be like, yep, take that out of your book. We don't want to see that. It tells me nothing about you. And
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
it consistently kept happening. And I was like, wow, okay. And so when I turned that corner and I was just like, I'm just going to share the things I love. And I don't care anymore. I'm done with it. I just want to share what I love. That's when people started contacting me and saying, hey, we want you to do that for us. I didn't have a clue. It wasn't planned, but I started seeing that happening and I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting. They want me to do that thing for them. And then that's when the agents started reaching out and I got my first agent. It all kind of started around
Great.
that point when I started sharing my own view on
Yeah.
things as opposed to what I thought everyone wanted to see.
Isn't that funny that we're sort of separate, but we've both had that. When I moved to Sydney, I was like, I thought I had to share this certain type of work, which actually just so wasn't me. Like I'm not saying this in a self-deprecating way, but I'm not cool. And I don't mean that in a
Think you're
bad
cool.
way, but I'm not
No, I
like,
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm not that cool, weird makeup artist that does these incredible, weird looks. Like, I
Gotcha.
love things that look beautiful
Yeah.
and a certain, and I know, so I think I was trying to be, I know what I was trying to be cool, and that's just not who I am. And I don't mean that horribly, but
No,
yeah.
I totally understand where you're coming from. I don't think I'm cool either. I think you've just gotta like And there are people that I think I meet and I'm like, wow, you're so cool, or you're so interesting, or you're so quirky, and I'm not that guy. I'm too mainstream for that. But totally. And I think that sometimes it's very easy to get influenced by, especially if you're seeing someone that you know doing really well early on, you start thinking, oh well, why are they getting all the work and I'm not? And I think it's easy to get lost in that. But I think what has to come first is, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to do? What do you love to share? And just share what you love. If you put that out, the rest sorts itself out. You're not trying to book every job under the sun, and you don't want
No.
those jobs, because if it's not authentic to who you are and what you do well, you're not going to do a good job on those jobs. Better to get someone who's authentically that person.
Yeah.
Get me for what I do.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
I
think so.
love that. Great advice. So, where did you get your first agent?
So in Sydney, my first agent was in Sydney, and I'd been freelance. It's hard to know. I mean, I'd been freelance maybe for a few years.
Yeah.
After assisting, I kind of went out and, like I said, I was doing a lot of paid testing for modeling agencies. That was kind of where my bread and butter was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was booking commercial jobs as well, but they were, just bits and pieces where I could get them and what I could
Yeah.
do. And that was starting to kind of take off. But that was when my first agent kind of reached out to me and said, let's get a coffee. And we met and went back and forth for a few months because I wasn't ready to commit to an agent.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible, yeah, that was the first moment. And it was a really good decision for me at the time.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
When you were doing paid tests, would you have a stylist and a team on board, like a makeup artist? Or
So
was
that
it
would, yeah. So the modeling agencies would actually dictate that. So
okay?
sometimes I'd always have a makeup artist,
Mm-hmm.
because generally for paid testing for modeling agencies, the agencies have a very clear vision of what they want. And they usually want something very clean, very slick,
Yeah.
very minimal. And, you just don't know what the model's skin is going to be like or what their hair is going to be like. So generally, at least it will be me and a makeup artist slash hairstylist, someone who can do both very naturally and easily.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes the agency will say to you, hey, we need fashion, we need to get a stylist on board, or hey, we just want to focus on beauty for this girl, or we want to focus on editorial for this girl. They'll let you know, and then I guess from there you build your team around, and your
Okay.
budget and all of that around what you want to do.
And you would build the team, not the
No,
modeling
I
agency?
would build the team with people I've worked with before.
Yeah.
And it was
Okay.
usually just me and the makeup artist. It was generally the same makeup artist all the time. We would just kind of always do that because we were coming up at the same time in our careers, and
Yeah. Okay.
that was like the timing of when that
Yeah.
happened. And it's good to kind of go through that together with a team that you're building a confidence and trust with.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that would have just been someone that you'd worked with before, liked their work, but also had a
totally.
relationship with?
Yeah, we'd just been doing our own little personal tests, and we kind of had shot together before. And when I saw what the modeling agency wanted, I kind of had an idea of who could do that well out of the people I'd worked with. And you just reach out, and some people it works, some people it doesn't. Like
Mm.
some paid testing for in our field, it's not for everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a good road for some, and it really was good for me. But it I think you've got to, sometimes you might do 4 or 5 models in a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might just do one.
Yeah.
But often, if it's paid testing, it's not a time for you to be able to get too creative and too crazy with it all. You're there to do a job. It's essentially a paid job. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you're there to kind of like essentially get good shots of this model so she can then go on and book work.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. But
Yeah.
you're saying it's not for everyone, as in because it's not creative?
Yeah. I just think that for some people, like, because you're generally the people who are doing the paid you're doing paid testing earlier on in your career, generally speaking,
Yeah.
as if you're doing it all the time, that is. Because once the commercial work starts coming in, and it'll overtake that usually.
Mm.
And so when you're early on in your career, I think being able to follow a brief and being quite restricted, and just, even though you've got these incredible faces, just following the brief, and not necessarily thinking, oh, I can do something amazing here, because you've got to follow what they've asked for, and it's always
Yeah.
pretty much going to be natural.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Extremely minimal. And from a
Yeah.
makeup point of view, sometimes it'll be like barely anything at all, and that's all you can do. You can't put the lip on, you can't put the eye on,
Yeah.
you can't have a play. It's not the time for it. And so
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
for some makeup artists, that can be quite frustrating early on,
Okay. Yeah.
because you're
Fair
not
enough.
getting,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Everyone wants to get something out of the shoot for themselves. So when you're doing your own personal tests, you'll get a beautiful makeup shot. You might be able to take that chance and do a crazy lip or an eye or whatever it is
Mm.
you do. Paid testing is a little bit different than that.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of your photography career, you said technically it wasn't there for you. Did you just become technically better through assisting and learning and then testing yourself?
Yeah, so assisting. I definitely
Yeah.
I was lucky that I worked with some really good photographers who were technically great. And
Hmm.
I think actually maybe a good way to put that is like figure out what your weaknesses are and assist people who have a strength in that so that you can learn from people who are really good at what you're not good at. But for me as a photographer, it was studio lighting. I had no idea how to use any lights. I'd only ever shot outside. And so I needed to learn because I think even if you're not a technical artist, like if you want to throw all those rules out the window, that's fine. But I think you need to take the time to learn and master them and get as good as you can at them before you then disregard them
Hmm.
because there's a difference.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
I just kind of I spent a long time learning studio lighting, and I would learn on set. I think I learned pretty much like 90% of it through assisting, and then I would then go on and do my own little test shoots and kind of try to replicate and play with it and just be like, well, hang on, what happens if I do this, or what if happens if I
Yeah.
turn it this way? Or but to learn those initial rules, I think you learn that through assisting.
Okay. Yeah.
I know it's a little bit different photography to makeup in that situation, but
No, I suppose with makeup, there's just different styles of makeup. The
yeah,
makeup you do in like a beauty shoot, for example, well, generally it's all about the skin, so it's quite minimal, maybe with a pop of something, or maybe not. So I think for makeup artists, we think we need to put so much on in the beginning of our careers
totally.
that it's like you're trying to show off, I don't know, or show that you think that to
Yeah,
show that you're good, you have to do all these things, but actually it's what you don't do sometimes that
I
shows
like that.
shows your skill.
Yeah. You know
And
what?
even
It's
with
actually the same
hair,
with it's the same with photographers and hair and everything. For us, it's lighting.
yeah,
Like we'll overcomplicate the lighting when we're starting out, and we'll
yeah,
think we have to have 6 or 7 lights, or like really complicated setups. When you don't have to, but you're trying to prove your skills, so you're
yes, yeah.
overcompensating by doing too much.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes
Yeah,
like with a model, like what you said, when you were doing test shoots, paid tests, sometimes you might, just have to curl the lashes and put a tiny little bit of concealer in a place. I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's knowing that that's all you have to do rather than doing a full makeup on someone that's going to
yeah. That's a
give the best
valuable. Yeah, hundred
of that
percent.
person, or their hair might be just beautiful the way it is, but there might be a couple of flyaways. So really you're just placing it
Yeah,
and getting rid of that.
100%.
And I think that's something that you don't learn at any makeup school. You can kind of only learn that through being on a shoot and seeing they haven't actually done a lot, but that doesn't mean you can't do a lot. You don't know how to do a lot, you know?
No, I think you need to learn how to do it, right? Like you need to learn
Yeah.
how to do a lot. You need to know like why. I think in order to be able to pull back at the right time and not do things, you need to know why you're not doing it. You can't
Yeah.
just be like, oh, I'm just going to leave it because I don't feel like doing the makeup or
Yeah.
I don't feel like putting a light on. You need to look at it. I guess, beauty photography and makeup, same thing. You look at a face and then, sometimes you'll see that the skin texture is incredible. You don't need to do anything and it'll actually look better if you don't do anything. But to know that you need to know the ins and outs of what it will look like if you've done a full face and you've mastered that. That's when you know. And I think that's for me, that's a sign of a really good makeup artist is someone who knows when to just not do anything. It shows so much confidence in your ability and skill. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I find that when you've got when you've got these incredible models, which all models are incredible, really, because that's their job, and they're lit so amazingly by a photographer, like for you, example, you don't need to do a lot,
No,
you know?
honestly, I mean, seriously, the amount of times I've had to say to a makeup artist, like, no, 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 nothing, like, please, nothing. And
Just a bit of
sometimes the makeup artist
moisturizer.
will hate me, but I'm just like, she doesn't need anything unless this is going to creatively enhance the shoot. We don't need to cover anything up because this person's beautiful
Yeah,
and we don't need to do anything. It's just let it be natural. And like you said, early on in your career, that can be hard to stomach because you feel like you're not doing your job.
yeah,
But like it happens a lot, especially on my own personal shoots. A lot of the time when I'm doing my own test shoots, it's just me and the model and I don't get any team. But usually I've vetted the model first to, do a skin check and I've, seen the casting shots. And sometimes I just know that if I bring a makeup artist on board, I'm going to spend the whole day telling her to do nothing.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough.
So,
Yeah,
and it's nothing against that. It's just, I might get a hairstylist on that shoot so that because I know that the hair will need work or that might add a creative element. Or I'll get a makeup artist who I know is totally fine and we'll do a creative concept where it's not about covering anything. It's about a colored eye it
yeah,
just depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say and what you want to show.
yes,
100%.
yeah.
But there are a lot of makeup artists out there that I drive crazy because I'm like, no, no, nothing, nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think even sometimes just as simple as curling lashes just can
Honestly,
make
totally.
such a huge difference, or a bit of moisturizer, or
Yeah,
maybe a bit of eye cream. Yeah, it just can make it will make can make a huge difference to the skin.
totally, totally.
But yeah, like, and but as you said, like with hair, sometimes you might need the hair to be something needs to be done with the
Mm,
hair, or you might want wind or something, who knows.
yeah, totally.
When it comes to working with other makeup or hairstylists, how do you go about that? Is it a recommendation? Do you look at their folio? Is it reputation? Where would you start?
I mean, it just depends. It's such a mix, right? I mean, if I think about the makeup artists I work with regularly, like, and how I came about working with them, I think it's different on almost all of them. Some of them I came up with, and we started those initial early tests together, and we've just always worked together because we got along, we know each other so well. Other people, it's, people I admired coming up. And so, I've always looked up to their work. And so then when I might have been put on a commercial job with them, and that's how we met. And so
Yeah,
from there, if the vibes are good and we got along on that, we start shooting together other ways.
yeah.
Sometimes makeup artists will reach out to me. Sometimes I'll reach out to makeup artists because I love what they do.
Mm,
It just depends. And I think for me, actually, I'm interested to hear your take on this as a makeup artist. I think seeing a makeup artist as just an umbrella term is too wide.
mm,
If I think about all the makeup artists I work with, like, there are different skill sets within makeup. Someone might be like known for doing incredible skin, and that's their thing. And so I know that, like, oh, I want to do a skin story. I kind of know who loves doing that. Not only are they good at it, but they love doing that. That's what they're
yeah,
about. And so, like, when I'm talking to makeup artists, you get an idea of what their passion is and what they love to do, so that you
yeah,
know who to kind of contact about what. I think that's really
yeah.
important.
No, I definitely think. I mean, there's definitely like makeup artists that love doing skin, love doing natural makeup, and I don't think I know that's me.
Yeah,
Whereas when it comes to like crazy, wild, creative things, like maybe someone who does, leads a lot of fashion shows, like Pat McGrath or someone I mean, like she's just
yeah,
wildly
yeah.
creative, right? And that's just a whole another level. Or there's a guy here in Melbourne, sorry, Sydney, Sean,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've worked with Sean. Yeah,
and his Instagram
that's
is
super
just
cool. Super
insane,
cool.
and he's so cool, and he's just what he
Yeah.
does, the way he sees and does a face. I
And I
saw
think that's
his,
because, yeah, sorry, I think he's being authentic to what he loves to do. And it shows.
yeah,
You look at his work and you know what he loves to do. It's a
yeah,
really good example, actually, of someone just sharing what they love and doing what they love, so that it gives people an idea of, okay, well, if you want that kind of makeup, you know who to go to.
yeah. I mean, if someone came to me and said they want that, I'm not, I'm not that person. But
Yeah. That's actually really valuable. So that's something I think early on, if someone, because early on when you're trying to get all those jobs, you say yes to everything that comes in,
yeah,
right? Because you're like, oh God, I need the money, I need the jobs. I remember saying yes to jobs where I looked at the brief and I knew I wasn't that person. And
yeah,
I looked at the style and the lighting and I just knew, like, that's not me. Like, I can do it, but I have, like, it's so far removed from what I'm good at and what I love to do. And those are the ones that never worked well. And so I
yeah,
think as you progress, like, learning when to say, like, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to recommend you to someone else because I actually think
yeah,
they're going to do a much better job than me. I think that's
yeah.
actually and I think that's actually better than going on to things that don't, that,
Well, that did happen to me like late last year, I think. So I was saying yes to this job, and I looked at the brief and I'm like, this just isn't me. It's way too cool. Like that's the only way I can explain it. And I had to fly to Melbourne for another job, and I'm like, why am I trying to force this job when it's actually not even me? I just recommended someone who I'm like, I think you should contact such and such because I think they're going to be far better suited to this.
I think that's a sign of a professional to do that.
Yeah, I was just
It
like,
reflects better on you, definitely.
yeah. I mean, I could do it, but I was like, "Oh, it's just not me." I mean, if Sean said to me, "Come and be on my team, my Fashion Week team or something that he's directing," and then he shows his style and then you do it, I'll be like, "Sure, that's great," because
Right.
then you're sort of learning at the same time. Well, you know what I mean? Like it's not
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
taking someone else's vision, but for me just to do that, I'm like, "Oh, that's just not who I am. It's just
Yeah,
not."
it's that authenticity piece, right?
And I'm
I
not
don't think
going to
there's
fit in
anything,
with the team, right? Like not
yeah,
like it's not going to vibe right on set because
totally.
I'm not that kind of vibe. So,
No, absolutely. And I think there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with experiment. It's a fine line, right? Because you want to experiment in your styles. Like, there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with, because you don't want to get pigeonholed and just do the same thing for the rest of your days. Like,
Yeah.
style and what you love and what you want to do changes over time. Like I've
Yeah.
definitely done that with me, but and I think what you can do, there's nothing wrong with experimenting and playing, but playing and then making that your style and sharing it, the different things. You can create,
Yes.
like have a little test shoot, play around, do things you're totally uncomfortable with. You don't have to share everything you do. That's how you experiment. And if you love doing it, you can go down that rabbit hole and you can play with it and you can, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Um,
Yeah.
Make it into something that you love. And if it's feeling authentic at that point, then you can start to kind of follow it
Yeah. And share it.
and
And
to share it. Yeah.
yeah.
But if you look at someone else's work and you think, wow, they're doing so well, that's what I need to do well, it won't translate because it's not coming from a clear place. It's
Yeah.
coming from like fear of my own career and insecurity and all these kind of things. And I think when
Yeah.
that's the driving factor, it's not a good start.
It's not. And I really wish that I paid attention to that earlier. I don't know if I knew that earlier, if anyone ever communicated it to me earlier. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you have to go through it. I don't know. I like no one really communicated that to me either. It's just like
Yeah.
with reflection, you can kind of see that like what we were saying earlier, that when you started to actually hone in on what you love, that's when it tends to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you can just bypass that whole chapter of your early career. I think you do need to kind of like play and experiment because you kind of only really figure out what you love to do through experimentation.
Yeah.
Because then something hits, like you'll be playing around with different styles and you'll do something and it just feels right. Or you're like, wow, I
Mm.
really love this. I want to keep going.
Mm.
But you can't magically figure that out. You have to try different things in order to get there.
Yeah, I think you do have to try different things, unless you know your style straight off, straight away, which I
Which
suppose
some
some
people
people
do.
maybe do. That wasn't me, but yeah, I'm sure some people do.
It's connected to your personal growth though as well. I mean,
Yeah,
especially if you're young and you're starting out young and you're coming into this young and you're 18 years old and you're starting, like your view on the world and what inspires you and what you love when you're 18 versus say when you're 25, 35, it changes. And so then
yeah,
if that connects to your own personal taste and style. So it's an evolution. I don't seldomly is it the same thing for your entire career.
yeah, true. Well,
I
that
think
would maybe get a little boring too.
yeah, it would get
Yeah,
boring for me. I'd probably have tapped out by now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they keep it fresh.
When, if people reach out to you to test, or do makeup artists reach out to you to test, or have you had that? What do you like to hear or see from them? Do you want to hear like they have a concept that maybe would align with you, or is it just, hey, I love your work. This is my style. I'd love to test with you. Like what
Yeah, I think
what sort
that
of
that one
aligns?
definitely
Yeah.
this. Yeah, I think and again, it has to be authentic. You have to actually love the person's work you're reaching out
Yes.
to.
Yep.
Because sometimes I can feel the difference between someone who, like a makeup artist, who will reach out to me and they'll say they love my work and then they'll link me their links and I'll see it and I can kind of actually feel the connection of like, okay, I see how that fits into what I do and we've got a similar kind of aesthetic and that makes sense to me. That's coming from an authentic place. But sometimes it might just be more like they might see that you're doing a certain client or you're shooting a certain brand and they're trying to jump onto that. And I think just be real, be authentic. And I don't think you need to come into it with a photographer with a concept. I don't think that usually works. I think when that works is when you've already got a relationship with that person.
Yeah, okay.
There are makeup artists I work with a lot who come to me with an idea and I'm in 100%. I'll be like,
Mm,
yeah, perfect. Because we have a relationship. They know how I shoot. I know how they do makeup. They'll know that if they're coming to me with an idea, it's because they think I'm the right person for it. And we have trust and we can experiment and play. But if someone I've never worked with before comes to me with this mood board and a concept, I don't think I've ever really kind of said yes to that.
yeah,
Because there's too many factors of like, I don't know how you work. I've never even met you. I don't even know
yeah,
if we're going to get along. But I think keep it casual. Everyone's different, but I think keep it casual. Tell them you love their work or why you love their work. That's always a really
yeah.
good one.
I
Be,
think
be
why is good.
specific. Yeah, be specific.
Yeah,
Don't just be like, I love your work. Be like, I
yeah.
love what you do with this, or I love the way you light, or I love the way the interactions with, or the expressions in the models' faces, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Be honest about why you love that photographer's work, and then just link your stuff. Just link your Instagram, your website. You can put a folio in if you want. It depends on
Mm,
where you're at, but just share what
yep,
you do, and the rest is up to the gods.
exactly. Would you ever, what if they were asking to meet you for coffee?
Yeah, occasionally. I mean yeah, I'm not against it. I mean, what would
Yeah.
generally help there is if we have some sort of mutual contact or
Yeah, true.
maybe
That
I've
does
seen their
help.
work or we've even, if we've met once in passing or something. But there's
Mm,
absolutely nothing wrong with asking to go grab a coffee. I love a coffee, as
yeah.
I'm always drinking coffee, but there's nothing wrong with asking. They might not say yes, but there's nothing wrong with saying like, why don't we grab a coffee and have a chat?
Yeah. See if our
Thanks.
energy. One thing I've been saying to people is just see if we see if our energy's aligned
Yeah,
because
I think that's a
that's
great.
really ultimately what you're trying to see, right? Let's just
Yeah,
see
I
if
mean that,
we,
and that's a huge part of it, right? That I mean, the
yeah,
teams you end up kind of working with regularly are the ones that you just get along with. At the end of the day, we spend 8 hours, 10 hours on a set together.
yeah,
You want to get along with the people you're working with. Like you want to
yeah,
appreciate them. You want to connect with what they do. It's like what we said with like a system where it's not you're not going to please everyone. You're not for everyone. You'll come across people you love working with, people you don't. You're not trying to please every single person under the sun. You're just trying to find the people that you mesh well with and work well with.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
So I had a few questions from the Makeup Inside audience, and I think we may have covered this, but I might just bring it up again. One was what makes a makeup artist stand out to you?
Again, I think I hate saying that it's different every time, but it actually is
Yeah,
different every time.
yeah,
I think for me personally, it helps me if it's the first time I'm kind of reaching, like hearing from someone or seeing someone's work. Similar to a photographer, if I can see what your thing is or what you love to do or your unique, what makes you unique.
yeah,
And that doesn't need to be crazy, unique, loud energy. It can be beautiful, soft, subtle skin. It can be the tones you use. It can be the texture in the skin. It can be anything. But if I can get an idea of your direction and what makes you tick and what you love, that helps. Sometimes if there's just too much variation and too much of like I'm a jack of all trades, for me personally, sometimes that can kind of make it hard for me because I'm like, generally when I'm whether it be a client recommend like asking me for a recommendation on a makeup artist or it's for a personal shoot, I want to get the right person for the right job. It's not just the
yeah,
one makeup artist on every shoot I do. So I think like in my head I want to think, beautiful natural, like, crazy loud energy, playful, fun, edgy, cool. Like I have different people in my minds for different, and that doesn't mean you can't branch out, but
yeah,
it's to kind of just have a point of reference of like this is what I love to do. This is what I celebrate in my work.
yeah. Do you think that personality on set too, if you have worked with the person before, that's something that stands out to you, sometimes
Yeah,
even more than the
definitely.
work?
Energy, for me, energy is massively important.
Yeah,
Like, for me, a big thing is ego. Like, I don't want to be on set with people who have a massive ego and be nice. Just be a nice person, be a
yeah,
nice human being.
yeah,
You can be incredible at what you do and you can be confident in what you do, but, I don't want bad energy on set. And so, like, generally speaking, like, you can be incredible, but if you've got really negative energy or you're difficult to work with, that can actually be a real deal breaker.
yeah,
Massively. Yeah.
absolutely. Because it's
Yeah.
just too hard.
Just be a good person.
Yeah,
It's
I love that.
prerequisite, right?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And another question I had was when it comes to, like, for example, if your model got a spot that day and you're doing like a beauty shoot, is it a less is more approach? Is that what works best with retouching or
Yeah, right. So this actually, yeah, this is one that comes up a lot, actually, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people.
mm,
So there's no blanket answer here.
mm,
Personally, I do think less is more, but I
yeah,
think what the approach 100% should always be is ask the photographer.
okay,
That's because every photographer has a different retouching style, a different lighting style. Even if the brief is the same, no two people are going to approach it the same way. And so, what I really appreciate, and I think what will actually win you a lot of points, is at the start of the day, if you are about to start the model's face, whether it's a job or a test, and you notice a lot of spots, or maybe the model has like very textured skin,
mm,
just go to the photographer, just have a 2-minute conversation before you start, and just say, hey, how are you thinking about lighting it today? I just noticed the model has this type of skin or she's got some spots. What's better for you? Like, do you want me to cover
okay,
it? Do you want me to leave it? What's easier for you? Because there are times where generally what will happen in that situation, I'll go look at the model. I'll come over to the
mm,
makeup station and take a look with you and we'll figure it out and then I can give you a clear answer. But I've had both. I've had it happen on both sides where the makeup artist has assumed that more is more and they've covered the face. And that's
yeah,
been really hard in post editing for me. And I've actually had the
mm,
opposite happen where people think like the less is more is just a blanket rule, where I
mm,
actually could have used a little bit of coverage.
okay,
It just depends on the brief, also the level of retouch, all these things. There's so many factors. So I think the best thing you can
yeah,
do is always just have a quick chat with the photographer in the morning
yeah, okay,
and just
yeah,
ask them, like, what would you prefer? What's easier for you? Are you retouching these or is it going to a retouching studio from the client where you don't have any control over it?
okay. Do you find that makeup artists generally do approach you, or like the hair and makeup do approach you before they start working? Like, Or do you
So
find, yeah,
I I mean, I think the first time it happened, it was a sign to me that like, okay, this is what it actually should be like. But it doesn't always happen. I mean, I've walked into big jobs where the model will come on with a full face of makeup and I haven't heard anything about it because I've been busy in a pre-production with the art director about something, and or maybe the makeup artist got there a bit earlier than me, or she just went straight into it, or he went straight into it, and I didn't have a chance to say like, hey, actually I'm lighting this with a very flashy light, so that's going to be super shiny. We need to
yeah,
pull it back. And that can delay the whole day. So the answer is like I would say more often than not, they don't approach and have a proper
mm,
chat before they start.
mm,
Generally, different on test shoots and concept ideas or editorials. That's a bit different because you're all there doing something creative. But on a commercial job, often it's just straight in. Like
yeah. Well, it would be, I suppose, because sometimes like they start earlier and then they've gotten the brief and then there's a creative director. But I
totally. I mean,
suppose it's
I take it
always,
upon myself now to always
yeah,
like I'll just approach because I know that what I know how much easier it'll make the whole day if we just have a chat first. But I think if you can just go see the photographer as soon as you get there, ask them how they're lighting it, what type of light they're using, because the relationship between makeup and light is like one of the
yeah,
most important things on a beauty job.
absolutely.
How I light the skin is going to affect how your makeup looks. And I think early on for some makeup artists, particularly I think makeup artists who are moving from say like events or anything into photo makeup, there is a difference with how makeup shoots versus how it looks on the skin. You might be really happy with what you've done on the day and think,
Yeah,
yeah, I killed this. You see the first test shot and you think, what is that? Like
yeah.
what's happened?
But I find that with hair as well,
Oh, totally. Yeah.
especially
100%. And
dark hair.
you can't know. And I mean, over time in
Yeah,
your career, you'll start to know that, okay, if they're using a very, punchy direct light, it's going to be super
yeah.
flashy. I've got to, matte the skin. I've got to make sure there's no shine versus like a really soft, dull light. You need to approach it a different way.
Mm.
Even just asking the photographer that, like, how are you lighting it today?
Another thing I've found is, I don't know if this is the correct term. I just call it like a treatment that goes over the,
Yeah, that's the right thing.
is that the right term? Yeah. So there's sometimes, well, actually quite often there's a treatment that goes over the
Yeah,
image
yeah.
and it can really alter the lip color, or alter
Yeah.
the blush color, or yeah, it changes the color. Like it can change it from, it can make it look more mauvey when it's not, which can
So this is a
sometimes
good one.
makes it can make the model look completely different. Looks like you've put a purple lipstick on them and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
and yeah, that one's probably the thing that's probably stumped me the most, really. I'm like,
Yeah, right. This is a fun conversation, actually. The two.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. So particularly for beauty, I mean, like in a fashion shoot, particularly editorial fashion, the treatments can get quite wild because, that lip is just a small element of this beautiful
exactly,
conceptual
yeah,
image. For beauty, the treatment or the grade, the color grade, whatever we want to call it, that's something that I think like again, it has to be a conversation between the makeup artist and the photographer.
yeah,
What'll tend to happen on the day is whether it be an ad job or whatever, I'll just have the digi or I'll just create a really quick color grade treatment that I think will look good.
yeah,
Now that grade is going to play with all the different colors and adjust things, right? And it works on color channels. And so, we might get the red color channel and just tweak it so it's a little bit more into the cooler tones or the warmer tones, but that will affect
mm,
a red lip. And so then the
mm,
red lip will go totally one way or the other that's not accurate to what you did. And that's a problem, right? And that's where I think, so on the day, if it's just a preview, that's fine. You, as a makeup artist, you don't have to go and then adjust it to match that color grade, but you should also say to the photographer, hey, so the lip's not reading correctly. Is that what I've done or is that your color grade? And then have that conversation with them. Because what I'll often do is when I get home, if I'm retouching that job, I'll make a note from the makeup artist that, okay, that lip has to be accurate, especially if we're shooting like a lipstick or a beauty brand.
yeah,
I'll fix that later, 100%. I'll make sure it's accurate. You don't have to do anything. But there will be times where maybe it's reading weirdly because of the light. And so you do have to.
mm,
So again, I think I'm just a big celebrator of conversation between makeup artist and photographer on any topic where you're not sure.
yeah.
Asking the photographer while they're shooting, hey, do you need me to adjust that? Or is that just, um, same, yeah, same thing with the conversation around like, can you fix that in post editing? Or that's
Should I
one
fix
that
it now?
just, yeah, like, there's
Yeah,
most of the time I'm going to say fix it now.
yeah,
But if we're on a deadline and we're rapid fire, we need to go, we've got 5 minutes to wrap up. Just ask the question like, do you want me to fix it now or do you want to do it in post? Like, but
yeah,
never assume a photographer will just fix your work in post. I think
yeah.
always try to nail it on the day.
Okay, great,
Yeah. And if there's an
great.
issue that you can't fix easily, tell the photographer, hey, there's a lash I can't fix, or there's something weird is happening with that brow. I'll send you an email at the end of the day just to remind you, just in post, keep an eye on that. I think it's always good to like make notes as you go on something you couldn't fix or something that's just reading really weirdly, and just tell the
Mm,
photographer for sure.
mm. That would make a makeup artist stand out, right? Like
Yeah, I mean,
that would
like
be
I've been blown away with when I started working with like some of the bigger artists. I was blown away with that jump in understanding of how to have that conversation. That's kind of where I actually learned how valuable that is.
yeah,
The first editorial I ever did in Sydney, print editorial, was an Elle magazine
yeah,
editorial, and it was like the main beauty shoot. And it was the first time I was working with Victoria Barron, and
yeah,
I loved Vic's work growing up. I was like,
yeah,
wow. So I got on set, and the thing that blew me away, Vic was one of the first people that just came to me before she started doing anything and said, like, how are you thinking about lighting it? What are we doing with skin? Do you want to come take a look at this? I'd never really been asked that level before anything had started. And I think just the dialogue throughout that day of letting me know when there's a potential issue with the makeup, or hey, can you just keep an eye on the edge of the lip or the lip line in that image? I've done it as best I can, but there's something going on. Whatever it
yeah.
is, just the dialogue and the conversation between it, so that I was fully aware going into every shot what was going on. And Vic adjusted her makeup to suit the lighting, and it was just, I think for me that was like a wow, okay, this is that next step up where there's so much understanding
Mm,
of how light of what my job does and how it interacts with your job. That's incredible.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
always going to
No,
lead to a better result.
yeah, absolutely. And I think though, as a makeup artist too, learning how to do that's a really good skill. Like I think sometimes you might sort of be too feel like you can be a little bit scared to speak
Yeah,
up or know how to,
of course. Yeah,
yeah, like you don't want to be seen as being like annoying or slowing it down, but it's still really important to have those conversations.
yeah, I think it's better to run the risk of being annoying
Yes.
versus like, I think that's better. Like, because if it's something, eventually you'll get that gauge of like, okay, I'm worrying too much. They're telling me to
Yes.
chill out. It's all good. But I think that as a photographer, I'll always appreciate a makeup artist who will like let me know when they're worried about something
Yeah.
versus not saying anything at all. And then I get home and I zoom in and I think, hang on, what happened there? And it's not a testament to skill necessarily, but if we had that conversation on the day, I could have said, look, it will be really hard for me to do that in post editing. I'd prefer it if you do it in person, or
Mm,
because it's a collaboration. If you're talking beauty photography and beauty
yeah.
shoots, the photographer and the makeup artist, they're both so equally important to how that shoot's going to turn out. It's not one or the other. As a photographer, it's not me. I'm just taking photos of a face of makeup. So the
Yeah.
makeup artist is the artist, and
Yeah.
I'm the one capturing it. But we need to really understand each other and have that dialogue the whole day. Like, it's
Yeah.
super, super important.
And I guess that's where the relationship is so important.
Yeah,
That's why it's great if you have worked with people before, or even if you haven't, though, you have that connection. You can
yeah,
have
definitely.
that vibe straight away.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think also just like it's a really simple thing. Just introduce yourself at the start of the day. Like,
Yeah.
I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but like just go up to the team, say hi, I'm Eddie. I'm the photographer today. It's so nice to work with you. Just at the very start, if you break down that wall early on, it actually might help with the nerves of feeling like you're being like I'm a little bit nervous about.
Yeah.
Just break that wall down at the start of the day,
And it's
introduce
done.
yourself to the team. It's done. And
Yeah.
then you've built that initial step, and that from there it's a lot easier. But it doesn't happen a lot. Sometimes
Yeah.
we're all tunnel visioned into our job, so we don't. Sometimes we forget that we're not the only role on the day.
I know.
I've done
Yeah.
it, especially if you're nervous or if you're worried about the job or if it's a big job. You're so in your own zone about like getting it right that you forget that you're only one little part of a huge like machine here that all need to work together to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's such a great piece of advice. Just do that and introduce yourself first. Like, make it your thing, introduce yourself and talk about the lighting. I mean, that's such incredible advice. If you could just,
Just hey, so how are we lighting today? Or like, hey,
yeah,
I'm really excited about today. Or hey, the model's incredible. Just
yeah,
have that conversation. It doesn't have to be like a hey, I'm really worried about this thing or that thing.
no,
Just just open a dialogue. And same with makeup artists. Photographers are all very different. Some photographers will be really open to that and they'll want to talk about everything. Some might not.
yeah,
No one shoe fits all. But at least if you open that dialogue before you start, there's nothing worse. I'm sure there's nothing worse as a makeup artist when the model gets sent back to your chair and you have to take the whole look off, because that must be I've seen that happen and it's horrible. It's a horrible experience.
Well, no one wants to be waited on, right? Like, wants the
Totally.
shoot waiting
And
on
then the
them. So,
stress starts because you're like, oh no,
yeah.
we're behind. So I think a really good way to avoid that because usually it's not because the makeup's bad, it's just because
No,
it hasn't lined up with
translated.
someone's vision, you know? More often than not, it'll just be like an art director or creative director saying it doesn't feel right. Can we take it
Mm,
off?
yeah.
To avoid that stress and that panic, if we can all have that conversation before you start, it'll save everyone and it'll help the whole team, but also it stops that risk
Yeah, for sure.
massively, for sure.
Eddie, I've just got another one last question
Yes.
about lighting.
Yep.
So I suppose for me, like being a makeup artist, the way I see lighting is it's really, I sort of see it in two very basic ways. So it's either going to be like there's going to be flash, or it's going to create shine, or it's going to take shine away.
Yep. Okay.
That's
Yeah. I mean that. Yeah. I think for beauty and like for skin, that's we
is
can we
that
can simplify it.
yeah, that's sort of, and I suppose for me, I see it as a degree of that.
Yeah.
Is there is there anything else that you can add to that for me?
So I think you're right in saying it's like a sliding scale. It's not one or the
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
For a photographer, what we sometimes split it as is like natural light versus like
yeah,
studio light or flash or
yeah.
continuous light. If you're shooting in a window and you kind of see what's going to happen there, that's natural ambient light. What you see is what you get. That's kind of easier to navigate.
Yeah.
And then with studio photography or like, artificial light, yes, I think it's a scale of ambient, soft light to hard, punchy flash and everywhere in between.
Hmm.
Um, and that I think is where the complication comes in. As a makeup artist, that's really hard to read, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
know. And the other problem you might have is that when you get a reference board or you get references for makeup, those references aren't always the same references I get as a photographer for lighting. So you might get a makeup board saying, like, we love this makeup. And there might be a shot of a girl in a window, a shot of a girl outside, a girl in studio with flash. And they're talking more about the overall look of the makeup they want. But I guess this is what I was saying before about like talk to the photographer, because I might have a board that's about lighting specific that is saying we want hard flash on everything today, and you haven't necessarily seen
Okay.
that.
Yeah. All right.
So often the boards are different. And so I think that's where it's like it can be complicated because you might have different lighting in your board and not really know, well, what am I dealing with?
Mm.
And likewise, as a photographer, sometimes I get a board which will have an outside beautiful soft light shot and a flash shot. And the first question I ask a client is, well, which one of these do you want? Because
Yeah.
that changes how I do it. So I think for you, identifying where on that scale it's going to be probably, I'm assuming, will help you a lot in the way you prep the skin, the amount of product you apply.
Yeah. Probably skin prep
That's,
most, really.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think skin prep is like the number one thing, right? If you nail the skin
Yeah.
prep, and also I think it's easier to build up than subtract most of the time.
Yeah.
So if in doubt, I think, yeah, no, it's a hard one. I think, again, have the conversation with the photographer about how they're thinking about lighting it. If you're unsure, get a test shot before you've finished everything up. Like, get to the point
Okay.
where it's going to show you what you need and say to the photographer, can we just get a quick skin check or a skin test?
Yeah.
Get them to take one shot with the flash, look at the screen. Again, don't just run off and change things. Talk to the photographer about, like,
Yeah.
is this where we're going to be? Like, how's this feeling? Like, are you going to be changing it much? Because I've seen that happen as well, where like the makeup artist will take the model back and then I change the lighting because the clients ask me. Dialogue. Like, definitely just
Yeah.
keep the dialogue
Okay.
going.
That's great advice, Eddie. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would love to share with anyone really listening to help them pursue their career? I mean, you've given away such great information. Thank you so much.
No,
Is there
no,
anything you'd like
you're
to
so
end
welcome.
with?
It's really nice to be chatting makeup for a change, not just photography. But no, look, I think we've covered a lot. But I think just yeah, I think again, it's like what we're talking about with building the relationships, reaching out, put yourself out there, don't be afraid, but figuring out what you love to do and celebrating that. I think that will lead you to teams and photographers that also align and love what you do. Don't try to please the specific person. Just you focus on you, focus on putting out what you love. The rest just comes. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Eddie, thank you so much.
You're welcome. No problems. It's been fun.
Thanks so much for your time, your knowledge. Thank you for all of it.
No, you're so welcome,
And
Vanessa. No
hopefully, we'll
problem.
see you back here in Australia soon.
I think soon. I think I might have a few things coming up. So
Amazing. Thanks.
thanks.